I've always loved RPGs that make you feel like you're on a real adventure with some friends. The kind of adventure where your goal is so far away. You're resting at settlements, traveling dangerous roads, avoiding the night. That Lord of the Rings feeling. Very few games have actually captured that for me. There are so many old school RPGs that try, but the journey never feels immersive enough. I rarely ever get invested. I started Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen recently and immediately fell in love with it, so much that I'm making a video on it, even though frankly, I don't think many people will be interested in this. The first time that I was forced to sprint back to Grand Soren late at night, right before I reached my objective because I knew I wasn't ready for it, that's when I knew that this game was made for me. Over the years, I've heard this game being compared to Dark Souls, and while that is a hilarious comparison, it's somewhat right. Dragon's Dogma does not around. The world in this game doesn't care about you. It doesn't provide you with a power fantasy right off the bat. You have to earn that privilege through questing, making money, defeating enemies to unlock awesome skills and afford a badass weapon. I always appreciate developers that aren't worried about scaring away players with insane difficulty. That is something I simply must respect because it means that you are confident that your game's payoff is gonna be great. One of my favorite videos I've ever made covered a few of those types of games, worlds that do not give a shit about the player. Now don't get me wrong, you are still the chosen one in Dragon's Dogma, but you really don't feel like it in the beginning. I got my ass whooped many a time and even went on easy mode for a few minutes before coming to the conclusion that that's a bitch move, so I switched back. The game itself is not unfair, it's not difficult to the point of frustration, but it will punish you if you're not careful. If you run into every encounter without a single thought in that skull of yours, it is very likely you will die. Before I get into how the combat works, I need to talk about this world. The Dragon's Dogma formula is so good because it wants you to feel like an adventurer at the very bottom of that ladder, going from rags to riches, I guess. Mechanics that most games give you by default are locked behind progression here. Fast travel, for example, is something you have to earn. The game refuses to give you shortcuts, which makes finally reaching a distant quest marker or affording that armor set you've been eyeing for hours feel super rewarding. I think using day-night cycles as actual gameplay mechanics, making it more than just a visual thing, is always interesting, and Dragon's Dogma does exactly that. The world at nighttime is noticeably more dangerous, with goblins leaving their camps to travel, zombies coming out through the ground, and the lack of visibility meaning you can get ambushed at any moment, whether that be by bandits or a boss. I try to leave for quests in the morning and get back to safety before the sun sets because in the early game, this danger is no joke and cannot be overstated. Multiple times have I been stuck outside in the dead of the night and my pawns are getting caught fighting infinite waves of zombies crawling out of the ground and I don't have the health or stamina to go back and revive them. Getting caught in the dark when you're unprepared is a guaranteed way to die or lose your party. It adds that extra layer of immersion and planning. The world just feels so alive, like I'm crossing a river and being ambushed by oversized lizards. Then I run directly into a chimera and get my rocked. Yeah, that was not my proudest moment. There is such a fundamental difference between Dragon's Dogma and something like Horizon or a Ubisoft game, and I think I can link that to the fact that Dragon's Dogma does not baby the player. It creates a sandbox for you to explore, but it doesn't give you loads of help right from the get-go. No fast travel, no markers. It doesn't encourage you to do the main story in the same way that other open world games might, where they put the main quest at the top of your journal. In fact, rushing through this game will either fail certain side quests or get you murdered by a pack of goblins because you're just underpowered. Dragon's Dogma demands some patience from you. Pick up jobs from the notice board, get your XP up, grow with your pawns, and develop a team that can protect one another and get shit done. These other games aren't necessarily bad, but they'll never give me that same feeling of immersion like this does. Which brings me back to the combat I was going to yap about. I was so surprised by how good this gameplay feels. I know it's kind of a shitty comparison, but comparing this to something like Skyrim, which came out just a year earlier, is night and day. Two open world RPGs, but it's obvious that one of them got lazy with the combat. Typical Bethesda. Fights feel impactful, whether that's launching a goblin into the air with upward strike, or knocking a cyclops down after dealing enough damage to it. Boss fights can be long, sometimes taking tens of minutes, and if you take enough damage and make enough mistakes, you can die much quicker than that. The game never lets you forget you're just another adventurer in this world. Acting like the main character will get you humbled real fast. This isn't your ordinary hack and slash, although it might seem it from the outside. While it does give you a bunch of over-the-top abilities, you're constantly forced to think about your positioning, where your pawns are, and what they're doing, what the enemy is weak to, and using that to your advantage. A boss can kill you very easily, but you can do the same to it if you think it through carefully. Dragon's Dogma is difficult if you go into it thinking you can brute force your way through every encounter, but if you take the time to engage with its systems, it can be a tough but immersive experience. Now, Dragon's Dogma wouldn't be Dragon's Dogma without its most interesting mechanic, monster climbing. To me, this takes it from being just another RPG to something of its own category. Climbing isn't just some gimmick that you use every now and then. Weak spots are actual physical locations on the monster. The Cyclops' eye, the Chimera's snake tail. You have to physically climb to get to these spots. You have to figure out how and when to reach for them, and you don't wait for the game to tell you when you're allowed to hit them. You are actively working towards weakening your opponents. Every second that you're hanging onto a boss drains stamina, so you're constantly deciding when to push your luck and when to bail. The climbing makes monsters feel like actual physical beings instead of just sponges. When you grab on and the creature starts thrashing around, everything just feels so heavy and dynamic. Any fight can turn into its own set piece because of this. This entire game is basically aura farming simulator. Fights can be clumsy and messy in a good way. Every boss fight feels like an uphill battle that you narrowly come out on top of, and that gives it a level of immersion, this feeling of involvement in the world, like you're an actual person there. I've always had a fascination for single-player games that try to feel like MMOs, and while Dragon's Dogma doesn't fully fall into that category, it's got elements of it. Teamwork makes the dream work here. You're not just thinking about yourself in fights, you're thinking about where your pawns are positioned, what they're doing, whether they're in trouble. Combat feels so active because everyone has their own role and job, but at the same time, you have to look out for one another. Sometimes your pawn grabs an enemy and calls you over to do some damage to it. Sometimes they get knocked down in battle and you have to go revive them. You're not tunnel visioned on the enemy. You're thinking about your environment, your surroundings, and your pawns. By the way, for context, I started off as a fighter but changed vocations to warrior later on. I'm kind of a basic bitch when it comes to these things. Give me a cool weapon. I don't need magic or anything. But I do know that Dragon's Dogma has a bunch of cool vocations, and I'm so thankful that it's easy to switch between them. Before my playthrough is up, I'm sure I'll try out a few more. I'd like to do some sort of mage build because I've seen a few clips and that shit looks insane. I do have something to confess to you. I haven't been fully transparent this video. See, the thing is that this isn't my first time playing Dragon's Dogma. In fact, I played DD2 at launch and got about 3/4 through the main story, maybe more. And while I was enamored by that game so much, I ultimately gave up on it and it didn't make the cut for my goated games list, simply because it got a little bit repetitive and there wasn't a broad enough range of content. DD2 has spectacular visuals. It has quality of life features and smaller details that add together to make a wonderful experience. experience. I think if it ever gets a Dark Arisen sort of DLC, it could become an all-timer, but in its current state, it just falls a tad bit short for me. The reason why I'm choosing to make this video on Dragon's Dogma 1 is because it feels like a complete experience. Dragon's Dogma 2 is amazing in the beginning, and I have so many fond memories of it, but those memories get a little bit sour when I remember fighting my 10th Cyclops in the span of 5 hours. I may be crazy, but I feel like the bosses in the first game are a bit more rare. I fought maybe 2 Cyclopses, I got up by a chimera, and I honestly cannot remember finding anything else in the open world, except of course the common enemies. And this is totally not a bad thing. I'm glad they don't spam the same bosses because it builds up anticipation and excitement for when you finally do spot one out and about. Dark Arisen also has some insane tracks from the OST. I know the original gets a lot of praise for its music, but I don't have much knowledge of that myself. But even so, my god, some of these songs are nuts. You've probably heard a few in the background of this video, and you can bet your ass you're gonna hear more of these in future uploads too. Before I end this video, I am planning on beating this game of course, but not before I do Bitter Black Isle, which I've heard is great. However, I have no clue when to start it because I've been getting mixed answers online. Some people say going in mid-game is most efficient and useful, others say it's only viable in the end game. So, Dragon's Dogma pros, do let me know, at what level is it best to venture to this area I've heard so much about? That'll be all from me for this video. I'm open to making a follow-up once I beat the game if this video gets enough support, so do let me know if you'd like that. Consider subscribing as well. I make weekly videos on the latest games I'm into. I'm gonna clock out now. See ya.